This video contains spoilers for The Mandalorian Season 1, 2, and the first two episodes of Season 3. It also assumes that you are a fan of the series and are moderately familiar with the Star Wars universe.
Oh my goodness, this is awful!
Hey viewer, this is Your Royal Majesty, the CDI Queen, with a video that deviates from my regularly scheduled programming. I'm doing this as part of my content diversifying, but also because I wanted a chance for my opinions on The Mandalorian and the Star Wars universe to be heard. Maybe I'm alone in how I think, or maybe there's more of you out there who agree. I'm going to start this video by making something very, very clear. I am a casual Star Wars fan. In fact, I only this year, being 2023, watched the original 3 movies. I know. That's all I've seen. It was actually the CDI King consort to be, CDI King for the remainder of this video, who said I had to watch them, and I'm glad he suggested it. That being said, I'm not trying to make it seem like I'm a hardcore fan whatsoever. And if I get any details wrong, please comment below and let me know. I hardly know anything about Star Wars, and I welcome the education. So again, I'm casual, and I actually think that that counts for something, and it may even make my problems with The Mandalorian a little bit more valid than a hardcore fan who will naturally be nitpicky about small details because they know it and love it so well. Whereas myself, I have a very high tolerance for bad media. I mean, I'm the freaking CDI queen. Most of my favorite video games are either notorious for being bad in general, or they are so bad that they aren't even well known because of that. For example, my very favorite Nintendo DS title, well, one of them, is Lux Pain, which you've probably never even heard of. It's translated so badly that I actually had to play it 3 times all the way through before I really got an idea of what it was about. And I still don't quite understand it, but I love it. It also has a really good soundtrack. So there is that. So let's talk about The Mandalorian. Alright, so like I said, I watched the original 3 Star Wars movies and I really enjoyed them. I found that even for older movies, they were fast-paced, action-packed, they had romance that wasn't annoying, and an emotional, tear-jerking ending. Tell you what, pop culture gave me so many spoilers about these movies. Luke, I am your father, I've known that my whole life. But I was blissfully and brilliantly unaware that Leia and Han were even a thing, and that Darth Vader finds redemption by the end. That scene had me almost sobbing. And I found that much of the plot line involving the Force had religious undertones, which I am always a sucker for, and watching these characters have human faults and then overcome them is always a really fulfilling experience, which this met very well. So, the CDI King says I need to watch The Mandalorian next, but that the other movies and shows are not really worth the time. Between you and me, I kind of want to watch the next 3 movies just because I find them culturally relevant enough that I should not skip them. But I'd like to know what you think and if it is actually worth the time to watch them. Bear in mind, I'm not a big movie watcher, so if it's a waste of time, I'm going to blame whoever said I should watch them. Okay, Season 1, Mandalorian. Brilliant. Loved it. Powerful soundtrack, emotive storytelling, and storyline. The action scenes were intense, but they weren't too frightening, so I could still enjoy it because I'm a sissy. Watching Din Djarin go from like this ambiguous figure to a protective father role over Grogu was really class A storytelling. Breaking protocol because he felt a deeper calling to the being that he found opened a door to a really captivating story. It was orchestrated in a way that plays on emotions, and watching the 2 of them get separated only to be brought back together by Din's own perseverance is, to me, as a viewer, ridiculously fulfilling. Great. Season 2. I started to dislike Grogu after he kept eating the frog lady's eggs, but I decided to forgive him because the character starts to go through some struggles, trying to harness his force powers all the while he's growing closer to Din Djarin, which is made to be a problem for him. Season 2 was particularly interesting because you start to see different dimensions to Din's world and his own personal path, particularly when we get introduced to Bo-Katan, another Mandalorian who doesn't abide by the same strict rules that Din does. But we are seeing some fluidity with Din, where he will take off his helmet and break his Mandalorian oaths, but not casually like Bo-Katan does. This is a divisiveness that strikes home to a Catholic such as myself. We see casual religious observances versus the really strict orthodoxy ways, and if you are like me, you can be sympathetic to both sides. The struggle of doing the right thing, doing the proper thing, taking care of yourself while also helping those you love is a resounding theme in this show, and it pulls it off really well. I couldn't make up my mind if I thought Bo-Katan was secretly evil and not really a Mandalorian, or if Din Djarin is a freaky cultist whose archaic beliefs should really be just something of the past. Sitting on a fence like that makes for great TV and just media in general because not only are you speculating the plot, but it makes you think about morality in general. I always like media that makes me contemplate bigger things outside of it. I think that is the... It means a lot to what has gone into it. So all in all, to me, Season 2 felt like an extension of Season 1, and I have no big misgivings. The Dark Troopers were genuinely horrifying, and the last episode had me on the edge of my seat, which doesn't often happen. Even as a casual Star Wars fan, the big reveal of Luke Skywalker at the end sent chills up my spine and tears down my face. The scene was pulled off in such a beautiful way that I can't imagine anybody watching that without feeling some kind of emotional movement. Then, Din removing his helmet to show Grogu his real face is such a powerful scene. And we consider everything he stands for, all of the rules he has broken for this child, and now he's going to exile himself from the people who saved him as a child, just to make a connection with Grogu. It's not because he doesn't care about his past, hardly. We know that he is very, very much so compelled to honor his Mandalorianness. But this is because Grogu has had such an impact on him that he recognizes the importance of that connection. It's given him something deeper to live for, which I have been told having children often does. My only big complaint with the first 2 seasons is that they seem to have a penchant for killing giant creatures who are just trying to live and defend their territory. I know I sound like a weenie saying this, but it makes me feel sad every time they blow up some big critter, and I found that happening a little more than I was comfortable with. But if that's my only problem, we're not doing too bad. Season 3 comes along. Wow. The king said that it would likely disappoint, and I didn't want to believe him, but as usual, he was right. Let's set this straight, though. Many of his misgivings about the show are not quite the same as mine. For example, he finds that swapping the Razor Crest for an N1 starfighter doesn't make sense with what Din does for a living. But these little details are completely meaningless to me. Remember, I'm a casual watcher, so I don't get hung up on technicalities, and if he hadn't mentioned that ship, I never would have even thought 2 words about it, aside from, it's new. Honestly, I probably wouldn't even notice I would have noticed. Yeah, no, I'm not that bad. But I did have really high hopes for Season 3, and honestly, I still do. It's only been 2 episodes, and I'm trying to be an optimist. But let's talk about why I'm here and saying these things and feeling these things. By the end of the first episode of Season 3, I was bored. All of the action sequences in it felt extremely forced, like they were pulling ideas out of a hat and then just slapping them all together. And the first 2 seasons absolutely did not feel like this whatsoever. The general plot of season 3 is making sense. Din has to find a way to go back to the potentially toxic Mandalore to bathe in the living waters beneath the mines to redeem himself because he broke his Mandalorian oaths by removing his helmet. Torn between Grogu and his faith, he has to try to balance them both. He's still persistent to keeping this faith, and I think that's something that we should really respect him for. What doesn't make sense is that in this episode, he is randomly fixated on bringing IG-11, that bounty hunter droid who tried to kill Grogu, but then was reprogrammed to be a nanny and sacrificed himself for them to live. That's all fine. That's all fine. But Din is like fixated on bringing this droid with him to Mandalore. He goes back to Navarro to get that droid, which has been almost completely destroyed, and Greef Karga tells him to just buy another droid. And Din, who remember, started out really not liking droids, but like warmed up a little bit to them. He's frankly, he's out of character in insisting on reviving this droid. He tries rebuilding it, and then it attacks them because it's not a nanny anymore. It reverted to its old programming. And there's this awkward action sequence that feels like really forced, like I said, and by the end, the robot gets crushed by Greef Karga's droid and not Din. I want you to remember that point because we're going to go back to that. It was the droid, not Din, that crushed that IG-11 when he came back. The immediate following scene, Greef Karga tells Din, just have one of the mechanics fix it. Which renders that entire previous scene useless. Why didn't Greef Karga just say that in the beginning when Din was like, I need that droid that I don't like, but do now? Be like, dude, go see a mechanic. Like, no, I'm just gonna stand there while you try to fix it, and then it tries to kill us because we need some kind of drama and can't write better drama. Like, okay, that's bad writing. Like, I'm not a great writer, right? I'm not a bad writer, but that's bad writing. It doesn't make sense. That won't happen in real life. If you were Greef Karga and you didn't want him to build this droid, or there were mechanics he could go to, you wouldn't just stand there while he tries to fix it, not even knowing if this guy even knows how to work on droids. And then after all this stuff goes, by the way, you should go to a mechanic. And then there's this fight scene between pirates and them on Navarro, and that feels really forced. Like, they show up and it's like they're instigating and no point to it. It feels to me like reading a 12-year-old's fan fiction. Not that I've ever read a 12-year-old's fan fiction, but I have been 12 and I have written fan fiction. And like, you're a good writer, so like you kind of know how to write, but it's not you're not that great, so things are kind of forced and they move a little too fast. That's what this feels like. It feels like some kid wrote this and they were like, oh yeah, let's make Pedro Pascal do some 12-year-old's fan fiction. God help us. So all of this left me feeling really confused because the first 2 seasons were so good. So good. I felt betrayed by the sloppy writing that came out of nowhere, and so betrayed that I didn't even want to watch the second episode when it came out. And I waited a few days because I didn't want to be disappointed again. Well, guess what? I was disappointed again. As with the first episode, the action scenes all felt really forced. Like, they feel forced. I can't explain it in any other way than I'm watching it and I'm like, they couldn't think of something better to be interesting. They just, Well, the plot is moving along, and it's making sense. Din does agree to give up on the IG-11 thing, and he takes R5 as his droid. And I like R5 because he's like R2-D2 and, has an attitude like that. So that's cool, right? Okay, whatever. Finally, he's doing something that makes sense. Like this character that's been logical and cool-headed, this whatever. You know what I mean? So, Din gets to Mandalore and he finds out that it's not toxic, which we kind of saw coming. They go underground and they get attacked by some monsters, which I guess makes sense because they're there and they need conflict. But then he's attacked by some weird other droid. I don't think it has a name. I don't know. I tried to look it up. It doesn't seem like anybody knows. Maybe it does. So Grogu has to escape by himself, and he goes back to Bo-Katan for help. Even as Din's ship is showing up, unknowingly to Bo-Katan without him, she literally says, let's make sure he never comes back. So it's like, we don't like this guy. But then she has a sudden change of heart. I can't figure out why. Maybe there's more to this character in, like, the Clone Wars or whatever she's from. Sorry, that sounds, like, naive. But, like I said, I don't know everything about the Star Wars universe. But it just seems like, oh, I don't want him to ever come back. Oh, okay, I'll save him. The only way that I can rationalize this with my knowledge on the series is that she does have some feelings for Grogu, cares about him as well, because he's a little baby, and agrees to help him because Grogu came to her asking for help. I get that, but I feel like that could have been insinuated if that was the case. I don't know, we'll see. So she goes to save Din from the cyborg, and then she takes him down to the living waters. And we get a little backstory on Bo-Katan's life as a royal in Mandalore, which is cool. I appreciate that. Somebody like me that doesn't know. And Din goes to bathe in the living waters. Doesn't even take his clothes off. This whole time, then he's gonna go bathe, and he's like, oh, don't take my gun off. Let's go bathe with their clothes on. It's okay. It's a family show. I get it. But I'm like, I don't even think Pedro Pascal is attractive. And I just, come on. It's a little... Anyway. So, he goes in the water and he gets attacked by the Mythosaur. And Bo-Katan has to save him for the second time in like 5 minutes. The episode ends with Bo-Katan looking stunned. I surmise, and I may be wrong, but she is stunned because the Mythosaur is actually real. And this will make her consider everything that Din believes in and adheres to strictly as meaningful. Because Bo-Katan said that the living waters don't have any magical properties. She doesn't really believe the oath, the power, the faith of the Mandalorian way. And if this is a turning point for her, oh my gosh, the Mythosaur is real. Well, then maybe there is a point to keeping your helmet on. Maybe the living waters do have some kind of power. Like, if this ends up happening, would be really cool. And I think that would be a really neat way for the plot to move. But honestly, I won't hold my breath because these 2 episodes have been written so badly. I feel like my idea for it to be cool and interesting is going to be disappointing. So, to wrap up here, do you remember how I mentioned earlier that IG-11 was crushed after Din tried to repair him, but it was the droid, I think it was Grief's droid, that saved him and not Din? So the reason why I said let's put a pin in that and get back to it is because something that I find really irritating about these first 2 episodes is that it's not Din that's saving the day like he did in the previous 2 seasons. So I know that he wasn't always the only savior, and oftentimes he needed help, and right at the last minute, more Mandalorians showed up or stuff like that. But most of the time, he was the badass who was making everything right. But in this season, he's been feeling like really helpless, like intentionally helpless, making pointless decisions, stupid decisions, that are putting him and Grogu at risk while not being able to save the day. I can think maybe the writers are trying to show that he's not perfect, even though we already know he's not perfect. And maybe they're exploring that a bit and trying to make it seem like, look, he can't always save the day, because not one person can always save the day. I get that. That's not realistic. But to me, it's not fitting the character. It's not fitting what we love about him. It's not fitting this image that we've had created these past 2 seasons of this guy who already started out not necessarily good and made this change to become like this father role, which is why we love him so much and what makes the character so irresistible. So to backtrack that, and to make it seem like now he's just some idiot that's like, no, I want this stupid droid. I'm gonna do this. And I can't even fight. That's not consistent, and to me feels like really bad writing. And that's why I think the rest of this season's gonna suck. But I won't know until we get there. So recap quickly. My whole beef with the season 3, and it's just been 2 episodes, I get it. But having Din being helpless, having these plot points that don't line up, dialogue that seems hastily written, characters making decisions out of character, and these action scenes that are just so forced feeling to me. They feel forced to me. Maybe I'm just like, I don't know. It just, these 2 episodes have not been good. I'm hoping they're going to improve, but I will not hold my breath. So, I welcome discussion. If you do not agree with me, I would love to hear why. I'm open to it. You know, this is just my opinion. I'm not saying that it's the gospel or anything, but I would like to hear it. If I got anything wrong again, do correct me, because I am not a Star Wars expert, and I could certainly make a video with all my corrections. Hey, guess what? Remember when I said that? Well, I'm a dumbass. And I'm a dumbass because this, and now I think this because this guy showed me the light. So, let me know, and I guess I'll let you know what happens as we move along in the show. But I won't hold my breath, because then I will die. Between you and me, I kind of want to watch the next 3, just because I think that they are so culturally relevant.
Sorry, baby. Okay.